and intellect. The great institution, that is our college, has always helped students to outshine themselves, and this is what Econtrix aims to do. Econtrix has conducted various events that have helped students to grow confident and channelize their energy into productivity. I feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to all of you present here today. We are gathered here for the first day of the 2 days lecture on discussion of Union Budget 2023-24. We are gathered here to join us all today.
Let us hope that the brightness of education overcomes the darkness of divisions, of injustice and oppression in society, and leads us to growth, equality, and liberty. I would like to request our esteemed guest, Dr. Manish Kumar, our dear principal, Professor Sarna Sharma ma'am, and the teacher in charge, Dr. Jyotsna ma'am, to please come forward for the last line. Manish ma'am, please join us for the last lighting. Lalita ma'am, please join us for the last lighting. Beautifully said by Saint Francis of Assisi, for it is in giving that we receive. I request our honorable principal ma'am to greet our guests with a planter as a token of warm reception. On behalf of Econtrix, we would now like to hand over a small gift as a token of gratitude to our guests, beautifully handcrafted by Nancy Potter. I would now request our teacher in charge, Dr. Jyotsna ma'am, to present the planter as a welcome token to principal ma'am. I now request our honorable principal, Professor Sadhna Sharma, to address the gathering.
Good morning and welcome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. We are extremely delighted to welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Manish Kumar, Assistant Professor at Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. Sir has done his PhD from Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal University. He has written extensively on issues related to agriculture, labor, health, and development. Many of his articles have been published in the Economic and Political Weekly. We are honored to have you here, sir. Therefore, without further delay, I would like to call upon Dr. Manish Kumar, sir, to enlighten us with knowledge on political aspects of EVs in the context of green energy.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team led by my senior, Dr. Jyotsna, and there are many friends I can see in the audience. So, thanks very much for having me here. Today, I am going to discuss about the topic as it suggests that I'm going to talk about the political aspects of freebies in the context of Union Budget 23-24. So, as Principal Ma'am just said, and I agree with her that we should not only focus about the political aspects. So every political decision has some economic background, especially when we are talking about the budget and budgetary allocation, expenditure, etc. So then there are some background economic thinking. And in this lecture, we will try to trace those economic theories and their fallacies that we generally use to criticize, and what could be done instead of adopting such measures. So this is what we are going to discuss. So first disclaimer after Principal Ma'am's address that in this political aspect, nothing is political here. So that is the first disclaimer from my side. Since this is a lecture, I would request everyone to participate in interactive manner. If you have any doubt, if you need any clarification at any point of time, feel free to stop me and ask. So please feel free. This political aspects of freebies in the context of Union Budget 23-24 is basically based on, this presentation is based on a paper which I co-authored with one of my friends who is at JNU. This was published last month in UPW. So those theories have been discussed in the context of Union Budget 23-24. In the last few months, we have come across this word freebie many times. So even in news debate, you would have heard that they are talking about some kind of free culture, freebies, revenue culture, etc., etc. So those things. So the first question that we should be interested in, what is So the first question that we need to ask is, what is freebie? So what is the literal meaning of freebie? When we are saying freebie, that means something which is given for free. So as if I am coming in this room and distributing chocolates to all of you. But when we are talking about the relation between state and the citizen, the person who is in the countryman and who is ruling, that relationship is not individual. So it is not the case that government is coming and distributing chocolates to all of us. So there is some unique relationship between state and the citizen, and that relationship in terms of economics, in terms of budgetary allocation, that is connected with tax revenue collection. So all of us pay taxes. So broadly, there are two parts of tax revenue. One is direct and one is indirect. If you would look at the last 5 years of tax revenue data, then you would realize that almost 52% are direct tax, sorry, indirect tax, and around 48% are indirect tax. So what is indirect tax? Largely GST, goods and service tax. So that is largely indirect tax. So whenever we are consuming anything, we are going in the market and buying something, we are paying a certain portion as a tax. So, since we are paying tax on each and every commodity that we consume, that means we are paying something to the government. And when government is giving it back in terms of other commodities or other services, that is not free. So that is the first step. So there are something which certain part of the revenue that we are also providing through our consumption, through our purchase, through our use of services, etc. Now there is direct tax, and that is also very crucial. In the direct tax, which is largely income tax, corporate profit, individual profit tax, etc. So in economics, it is well established fact that largest portion of profit is actually coming from those who are the downtrodden of the society, those who are poor, those who are working population of the society. So they are the main source of the profit. So in direct tax, they are contributing indirectly. In indirect tax, they are contributing directly. So if you would look at the Oxfam inequality report, the recent inequality report, there you would find that they are also the tax collection by the Indian government, and majority of indirect tax is actually coming from those who are the poor section of the society, poor section of the economy. So in that way, if government is making any scheme, if government is planning or executing any services in the society and using some revenue, the source of revenue is directly or indirectly coming from the largely poor, large extent that is coming from the poor or marginalized section of the society. So that is a well established thing by now. So do we have any official meaning of free? Do we have that? When I'm saying official, that means government. So we all know that there are three organs of the government: judiciary, executive, and legislative. So till date, do we have any definition of freebie by the legislative, by the parliament? Answer is no. Do we have any direction by the judiciary, Supreme Court of India? The answer is no. Do we have any directives or any ordinance from the government of India? Answer is no. So we do not have any official definition of freebie till date. Still, we are talking about freebie. So obviously, there must be some rumor, there must be some discussion, some economic discourse that is which are basically forcing us to discuss about freebie, and those are not directly government's position, but there are many independent organization institutions such as Reserve Bank of India, largest public sector bank, State Bank of India, and 15th Finance Commission, the chairperson of the 15th Finance Commission. So if you go by the official position, not the official position, even RBI, this particular understanding of freebie in the RBI last year, in June monthly bulletin of RBI. After the report, they said that this is not their official position. So I'm also giving that information to you. So Reserve Bank of India classifies provision for free electricity, free water, free public transportation, waiver of pending utility bills, and farm loan waivers as free. So that is the position taken by RBI or the author of that particular bulletin. 15th Finance Commission, chairperson of the 15th Finance Commission, not in his official position, but individual position, he is saying that we can distinguish between very good and public goods. So there is a pool of public goods. So all of us know that what is public. And within that, there would be some good which will have certain merit, which is required for the society, and government is required to intervene through the expenditure of that particular commodity. So those commodities are merit. So he classifies these two categories and defines freebies in the context of providing free power, free water, consumption goods, which according to him is quick passport to fiscal disaster. The third view, which is coming from the chief economic advisor of the State Bank of India, according to this view, they are talking about old pension system and all sorts of farm loan waiver, etc. So those things. So if you look at these three kind of prominent understanding of free, then basically they are talking about expenditure of the government on social sector, and in particular subsidies. This understanding is not new, by the way. So this word may be new for us. That is widely discussed in last 15 or 20 months. But this particular trend or this particular understanding of freebies or something which is mentioned here as freebies is basically about subsidies on different social sector goods or services. This trend is basically adopted 3 decades ago. And this is not only about this current government. This trend is in operation. This economic understanding is in operation in last 3 decades, in last 30 years. And what has happened in last? Anyway, so if we look at last 3 decades, so this is, so I'm just trying to build the background before we are coming to the social sector expenditure of the current budget. So I'm just building the background, and this is very interesting thing. So in 1991, if you would look at the share of wage and profit in the total earning of the organized sector, then wage used to be 141% of the total profit in 1991. Now it is close to half of the profit. So this is the situation in the organized sector. Organized sector, which is generally considered as where you have serious implementation of the laws. And apart from organized sector, the largest portion of the Indian economy is basically unorganized sector. And even within unorganized sector, you have informal employment. The situation of the relation between wage and profit is worse in the informal employment. If this is the situation in case of organized sector, you can imagine the situation in the case of unorganized sector, informal economy. In this graph, what we are trying to say is basically there is a continuous debate on how to increase the growth rate of India, how to increase GDP, etc. We are also talking about the per capita GDP, etc. So the second question that we ask when we are talking about the GDP growth rate or growth in general, how much this growth is inclusive? Is this growth includes every citizen of the country? So this is a question that we need to ask. The largest.
Can we just go back to the previous graph, please? I just want to know, was there a change in the definition of other emoluments? Because you can see the gap between different.
No, other emoluments is basically some benefit given by the company directly to the workers in.
Why is there a dip there in 98, 99? The gap kind of narrows down.
So in that particular year, the emolument part was closer to 0. So that's why this is the case. So this is just factual information. I have
We don't know the reason.
So we know the reason that in that particular year, emolument was 0. That is available on RBI. This data was taken from Reserve Bank of India. So in this graph, what I was saying that just to measure the inclusiveness of the growth of the country, we have taken this particular parameter because we don't have any other indicator to judge that particular inclusiveness of the growth of the country. So that's why we have taken this. We have taken number of days required by casual worker in agriculture and non-agriculture to reach the per capita GDP goal. per capita GDP. So for agriculture casual worker used to take 164 days in 98-99 to reach the per capita GDP. Now they require 281 days. 281 days to reach that particular level. That means if he continuously working in the field for 281 days, then only he will reach the per capita level. That means the distance between growth of the country and the income growth of the agricultural worker has increased. Similarly, in case of the casual worker in non-agriculture sector, you can see the rise is from 256 days to 414 days. That means it's almost impossible for it was for non-agricultural and that was for it. So for agricultural worker, it requires 414 days to reach the per capita level of GDP. That means the per capita GDP level is not accessible for agriculture. Right. So this is what has happened in the last 3 years. One more graph that talks about the situation and the number of days required by workers in the organized sector. This is based on the ASI, Annual Survey of Industries data. So from 91, it has increased to 2,000. So this is the situation of organized sector workers. So you can imagine about unorganized sector workers. Now, if we look at the expenditure, social sector expenditure of the government in last 5 years or so, we would realize that this is for education. As proportion of GDP is close to 0.4, and as proportion of the total expenditure, budgetary expenditure, it is close to 3%, or even in last 5 years it has declined from 3.5% to 2.5%. So there is a decline, but as proportion of GDP, you have the expenditure, the total expenditure by union government on education is more or less 0.4% of the total GDP of the country. Next. Now, if we disaggregate that expenditure part, then we see that either we are stagnant, the social sector expenditure in different schemes. For example, in midday meal, our expenditure in revised estimate for 22-23 was 12,800 crores. Now it is for the next year budget estimate is 11,600 crores. So there is a decline. But there are some heads where you have increase in numbers. For example, this a club day model residential school that is especially for building schools. There you have very good rise from 2,000 to 5,900 crore rupees. What is the difference between these two kinds of expenditure? I will discuss in a while. Now, the other important component of the social sector expenditure is written here. So here, if you look at National Health Mission expenditure on the health by the union government, there is a rise of 9%. But when you look at the food subsidy part, there is a decline of 31%. In case of midday meal, I have just discussed, there is a decline of 9%. Jal Jeevan Mission, there is an increase of 27%. Swachh Bharat Mission, increase of 74%. Manrega, Critical Employment Generation Program, there is a decline of 33%. National Livelihood Mission, you have marginal increase of 2%. If you consider inflation, then that is actually negative. Similarly, if you just look at the total expenditure on nutritional sensitive programs or schemes, there is an absolute decline of 17%. If you consider inflation, then the decline would be larger. Ayushman Bharat, Actually, that is included in one of the rate is in.
No, but more importantly, there's a food subsidy, you're talking of the pandemic also. So the free food, that's not covered here.
No, if you
Despite that, there is a
no,
decline.
the pandemic year was 2021. Then your expenditure was 5,41,000 crore.
But then they are continuing this year also.
They are continuing, yes, they are continuing.
So you still have a
So
decline.
there are two parts of the food subsidy. One is given to the FCI for procurement, one is given to the warehouse. So the component which is given to FCI for procurement. So now, if we just combine all those numbers, since we are economists and many of my friends sitting here are actually aspiring to be economists. So we should not only be concerned about the numbers. We should be thinking about the economic understanding behind those numbers and those trends. So from expenditure pattern of last 30 years, what we can say, there are two broad trends that we can identify. One is budgetary allocation follows fiscal prudence. This word is also very famous. So even in new channel debate, we generally appreciate this fiscal prudence thing. So basically in the fiscal prudence, our focus is to cut expenditure, or indirectly our focus is to cut the fiscal deficit part. This year it was 5.9%, and the target given by the IMF is 3.5% for any government for a sustainable governance. So this is one trend that we are following religiously in last 30 years. The second trend is, even if we are spending money, then our focus is on capital expenditure more than revenue expenditure. So what is the logic behind those things? And even within revenue expenditure, if you look at some schemes, then you would realize that this kind of expenditures are on insurance or credit type of schemes. For example, Swasth Bima Yojana, or some other kind of credit program where government is providing you subsidized credit for doing some kind of work. So those are the things. So we need to ask ourselves, why are we following this kind of economic policy where we are cutting our expenditure, and even if we are spending money, then why are we spending more on capital expenditure? These are the two questions that I'm going to address in next few minutes. Yes.
So it's spending more on capital, if you are increasing the capital expenditure, isn't it preferable because it helps in the development of the infrastructure?
No.
So why are we questioning this policy? Isn't it?
No, I'm not questioning. I'm just trying to understand the economic thinking behind that. You are right that when we are spending money on the capital thing, then we are building infrastructure. But there are some other objectives of the government expenditure that we need to take into consideration. And then only we need to judge whether how much we should focus on capital expenditure and how much we should focus on revenue expenditure. And the behavior of these two expenditures are also very different from us. That also we need to understand. I'm just going to address that part after discussing the first point. Then we will come to the binary between capital and revenue expenditure. The theory which is responsible for cutting expenditure is basically known as crowding out of private investment. So what is that? So in a simple way, in a simple economy, if government is spending money, this curve will move upward, and as a result, interest will equilibrium level of interest rate high. That will discourage the private party to invest in the economy because their realization from the investment would decrease. As a result of that, they would actually discourage. So this particular government expenditure would discourage the private investment, and that would indirectly or directly affect the growth prospects of the country. This is the mainstream understanding of the economics. And this is what we are doing. Unfortunately, can you go to the next slide? Unfortunately, this particular theory, the crowding out theory, is basically erroneous. This is very problematic, and its falsity was established through Keynes-Kahn multiplier almost a century ago. So why I'm saying that? So can you go back to the previous slide? So in this case, one of the crucial assumptions of crowding out theory is all factors of production are fully influenced. This is one of the basic assumptions that is implemented here. That means if government is spending money, then there is a limited pool of savings from which private party are also borrowing, government is also borrowing. If government is borrowing and spending money, then the amount of saving remain for private party will decline and would be available at higher interest rate. So that would discourage the private investment. I hope I am clear on that. So there is a limited saving because all factors are fully. We know this is impossible in the real world. This is completely impossible in the real world. All factors of production, especially workers, are not fully employed in any economy on this planet. And there are other reasons. When I'm saying that, so basically, if the government is spending money, then that would also increase the saving. Because if you are employing more people and you are providing money, that person will have money. After consumption, they will also save. So the saving will also increase. So assuming in this particular model of crowding out private investment, in this model, you are assuming that saving is limited. That is not possible if you remove that assumption of all factors are fully employed. Right? So if that assumption is removed, then whole structure of crowding out theory collapses. And that is the main criticism. So we need to question on that aspect, that if crowding out is not happening, then why are we focusing on decreasing the government expenditure? So the alternative for this crowding out theory, which I just mentioned, is basically multiplier theory. We also know that government expenditure multiplier. So a large majority of scholars, even within the capitalist system, agrees that government spending programs have the ability to secure full employment and can act as a stabilizer in time of economic downturn. So even whenever you face economic crisis, global economic crisis, etc., then there would be a same set of people who were earlier accusing the government expenditure. They would actually ask the government to bail out or to increase their spending. So this is the major, even in the mainstream thinking. So, however, the new liberal economists who basically speak exclusively to safeguard international finance capital do not agree, as they hate to see the state being an employment generator. They believe that government expenditure reduces private investment opportunities and leads to fall in gross output income of the economy, which they term as crowding out. We have alternative, and that is multiplier. So this simply is because government expenditure results in an increase in effective demand for goods and services and can reach up to a point where full employment is achieved. So until and unless you are achieving the full employment, there would be continuous rise in saving because of the expansion of government expenditure. If that is, if all factors are fully employed, then this expansion of saving would not be possible. This subsequently would also lead to a rise in national income. Government spending financed by borrowing produces an excess of private saving over the private investment at any given %. That is also very interesting. So if government is borrowing money and then spending the economy, that means that equal amount will be added in the private sector. So that actually, I will explain that in next few slides. So this is the simple multiplier in a simple economy, that delta Y by delta G. In simple economy, simple closed economy. If you would like to make it open economy or include tax, etc., that will not change our main result. So I'm just using this for the sake of simplicity.
Manish, are we challenging the Guardian equivalence by going with this argument?
The Guardian. No, not really. Actually, I'm talking about the crowding out thing.
So
And
if-
crowding out is not especially.
Okay,
So
that
can you
argument is,
explain?
yeah, so the Guardian equivalence says if you borrow today, right, the government is going to finance its funding, spending by borrowing, people can foresee that. And therefore, instead of increasing their spending, what are they going to do? They have to realize that it would lead to a future increase in taxes.
Actually, I'm not discussing that part because most of the discussion that we are following is basically on the King's line, where we are focusing on the short run. We are not talking about the long run where we are seeing
Everybody is
changes. So
Only
we,
against everybody is dead in the long run.
so we are not focusing on that part, that there would be some future increase in taxes, etc. Although I have answered to that particular question as well in the next few slides when we are talking about funding government expenditure through borrowings and funding government expenditure through increasing tax, which can be more preferable for people. So I'm going to discuss that part as well in the next few slides. So in this case, we have a very simple multiplier, closed economy multiplier. If you want to complicate it, we can do that, but that will not change our behavior. So there can be there cannot be any dispute that marginal propensity to consume, which is the proportion of consumption out of total income, for section or class of the society, all sections of the society are different. So basically, there would be a class in economy who would consume their entire income, and there would be a class in economy who would save their entire income. So whatever they earn, they save, and whatever the other class would be such that whatever they earn, they consume. So there is no dispute on that. We have vast number of literature to support that claim. So on the basis of empirically proven studies that there is an inverse relation between economic class of households and marginal propensity to consume in India. And that is very old paper, but very relevant paper. And unfortunately, none of us are doing any updated research on that particular thing, but that is very interesting thing. So according to that particular literature, so there is a general consensus that MPC of the economically weaker section is more than MPC of rich, ranging between 4.9 for weaker section, for rich section, for ultra rich, and 1.5 for poorest section of the society. This is the case of India, case of study for India in 1974. Now, considering that part, because MPC was the crucial factor in our multiplier formula. So, and we also understand that MPC for different class of the society would be different. So we have to take that into consideration. And if we disaggregate different classes of the economy between different income groups, then basically we are solving those questions that yeah. So now we are just, I will not discuss the complicated part here. I'm just simplifying for the discussion here. How much time is it? Half an hour. Then we can discuss that. So now we agree that marginal propensity to consume for different section of the society would be different depending upon their income. There would be some section of the society who would consume their entire income, and there would be for them MPC would be equal to 1, and those who are saving their entire income, for them MPC would be 0. Right? And the multiplier would vary accordingly. So delta Y by delta G would be anything between 1 and infinity. Right? Now we are considering there are two sections of the society, poor, and empirically we have we have proved that MPC for poor is higher than MPC of rich. So alpha and beta are marginal propensity to consume for poor and rich respectively, and alpha is more than beta. A and B are the share ex ante share of income of poor and rich. So the equilibrium level of MPC for this particular economy would be A alpha plus B beta. If you just solve the equation, you will arrive at this particular. So this is the composite level of multiplier. This I have calculated. Now I have also calculated that this particular value would lie between alpha and beta. So the lower limit for this is beta and upper limit is alpha. This can vary. Any income distribution in favor of poor. So if we are assuming that government is spending money and giving money to poor, what would happen? And if government is spending for rich, then what would happen? So if government is creating a income distribution in favor of poor, then this would move towards alpha, which is larger than beta, bigger multiplier. And if you are increasing, or the income distribution is such that which prefers rich, then we will move towards beta. What we are trying to say that income distribution in favor of the poor as a result of government expenditure can increase the combined MPC, marginal propensity to consume, of the economy, and hence the economy will move towards larger multiplier. Because we know that if MPC is rising, 1 upon 1 minus MPC, if MPC is rising, then delta Y by delta Z will also rise. So growth rate of the GDP will also increase. So this increment will continue until the class position of these two income groups are reversed. Okay, because class position would reverse means that rich becomes poor, poor becomes rich, then their consumption pattern will also change, right? Obviously, we are not talking about such scenario where government would spend that amount which would change the class position of these two classes. Yes. So the disaggregated multiplier also helps to solve the debate around capital versus revenue expenditure that you asked. So let me give you one example, empirical study, which says that in this paper, 2021 paper by one economic service officer, she calculates the multiplier for the entire economy for capital expenditure part and revenue expenditure part. So according to the capital expenditure multiplier is 3.4. The value of multiplier is associated, if you just solve the multiplier formula, if you just solve that 1 upon 1 minus MPC, and if you give this value of multiplier that is 3.44, then MPC, the associated number, MPC is 0.61 in a simple equation. What does it mean? It means that if we find any economic class in our society for which MPC is more than 0.71, that can give you larger multipliers. So what is the debate? Debate is there are some people from NIPFP, they basically started this study on multipliers, and they argued that capital expenditure multiplier is higher than the revenue expenditure multiplier. And on that basis, they were saying that if government is building any or constructing any institution or doing any construction work, that means capital expenditure, then there is a higher multiplier that would have higher impact on the growth. If you compare that with the revenue expenditure of the same power. If that is true, then that understanding is coming from this formula of multiplier. So there should not be any dispute on this multiplier thing, ideally, because they are using this multiplier formula to prove that capital expenditure is more beneficial. If that is so, then from the same formula, we are suggesting that if government is spending money on capital expenditure, then ideally, why not spend money on those economic classes who can give you higher multiplier because their MPC is 0.7. If that is the case, then ideally your revenue expenditure can also be beneficial. In fact, in some cases, empirically, revenue expenditure can give you more return than the capital expenditure. That can have more impact on the growth, affirmative impact on the growth than the capital expenditure. So that is very much well established. I hope I have answered your question. I'm coming. I'm coming to that. No, no. No. The other thing is related to your question only, that if we are focusing on this capital expenditure versus revenue expenditure thing, there are many expenditure on the revenue expenditure part which has very good return which cannot be measured in terms of economic indicators. For example, there is one study from UP that says that distribution of laptop to the students not only encourages them to participate in the education system, but that also decreases the gender gap of education. There are many things possible. So those are also aspects of those things. Now, if we go back to these numbers, which is in front of us, then we realize that this is the overall pattern of the government expenditure. Now you can identify the expenditure pattern for those where you are actually building roads, you are doing some construction, building schools, for example, for a club-based school construction. So those things are rising. On the other hand, when you are looking at subsidy part like midday meal scheme, you are talking about the food subsidy part, those things are declining. So this is the overall functioning of the government, or not only this budget, the entire budget. I would suggest that I can take questions on budget if there is any in the question answer, because this is largely what I wanted to discuss. And there one more. Discussion will be complete. And finally, that if we look at, can you go to the last? No. So this is the final questions from our side that we should discuss, that what is the, in the context of Union Budget 23-24 and the way forward. So impact on growth and growing economic inequality. So what is the impact of this Union Budget that is in front of us, where you have expenditure cut to a large extent, and even if you are spending money, then you are basically focusing on the capital part and not on the revenue part. So what it would do to the growth and growing economic inequality? Recently, the same inequality report by Oxfam, they said that upper 1% of the economies of the society of the Indian economy is basically holding majority of the Indian wealth. So that kind of inequality is basically rising day by day. So do we have anything in this budget to address the growing economic? The answer is, given this kind of expenditure behavior that we have just discussed in few numbers and some economic theories, that looks very difficult. That looks very difficult because we are not focusing on inequality mitigating impact of government expenditure, which is very crucial. So government expenditure should not only look at the increasing GDP growth, they should also focus on decreasing the inequality in the economy. Right? So this particular budget would last. So this particular budget may address growth part to some extent, but may not address the growing economic inequality in the economy. Do we have alternative? That is the question. That as a policymaker, as a economic thinkers, we should ask ourselves: do we have alternative? Yes, we have.
Dr. Manish, I just have one question with regard to the first question
Yeah.
that you have put in. I just wanted to ask it, where you were presenting the slides of the data analysis, wherein you have discussed about the difference between, like the difference distance that the agricultural workers and non-agricultural workers has to cover to reach the per capita income. So recently, if you look at the 2022 and 2023 growth rates, so we have seen that majorly the growth has happened due to the private consumption, right? 58% has come from the private consumption and 10% from the investment. So not the government expenditure, not the investment. So collectively, 70% growth has come from the consumption only, if you look at the GDP numbers, right?
True.
So there in the data part, we have said that to reach the per capita income for the agricultural workers, it will take them 414 days, which is nearly impossible to do that. How is this explaining this paradox? Like we are having, like, it's not a question kind of, it's like open to all. I see it as a paradox because one way we are saying that the growth is coming from the private consumption, which is including the agriculture as well, right? Other way we are saying that it's nearly impossible.
So when we're talking about the growth, that's very interesting. When we are talking about the growth, then we are saying that whatever growth we are experiencing, majority of it is because of the demand side, boosting the consumption. So that is from the consumption part, demand part. If you are strengthening the demand side of the economy, that would certainly help you to achieve positive growth. And that is happening in the case of India. That is true. But when we are talking about that particular graph, then the economic policies that we are adopting in last 3 years, that is actually doing contrary. They are focusing on something else and not on boosting this particular, strengthening the demand side of the economy through pushing increasing the income of the agricultural worker or agricultural sector, etc. So that is happening simultaneously. That is possible. So when we are talking about a growth rate of one particular year, then we are talking about that, then we are comparing GDP of 1 year with the previous year. That's it. But when I'm discussing that trend, that is for last 30 years.
I see.
And in that case, their income has declined, but they are still consuming. And the answer lies in the multiplier formula that is used for designing the overall budget. The multiplier formula is actually behind the entire budget of any country.
Can we draw the conclusion?
So the conclusion is that their MPC is close to 1. That's why their impact on the economy is positive, although their income is. So when we are talking about the multiplier or growth, then we are focusing on the proportion of the income that they are consuming. So such workers for whom reaching the per capita level of GDP takes 414 days, for such workers, they are actually consuming their entire income. And in some cases, if you go and see that paper by Wakil, so there would be some section of the society or the economy for which the MPC is more than one. They are actually consuming more than whatever they earn. Basically, they are borrowing and they are in the debt trap.
So can we say that the growth that has happened is not inclusive?
Growth is certainly not inclusive. This is what I'm saying. This is exactly what I'm saying. Our growth pattern is not inclusive, and that is not going to be inclusive given this kind of budget that is in front of us right now. Because whatever social sector expenditure we have seen, education, health, employment generation program, everywhere we have budget cut. Okay, and when you look at even increase in some expenditure, that is only on account of capital expenditure. And capital expenditure has its own problem that may give you higher growth. That's true. That capital expenditure can give you the high level of growth, but it is also true that government should not only concerned about the high growth rate, government should also be concerned about mitigating the inequality in economy, mitigating the economic inequality. That should also be the concern. So can capital expenditure or increasing capital expenditure address that particular thing? The answer is no. Capital expenditure also increases is some expenditure which have more surplus content than the wage cut. And because it has more focus on the generating surplus, it may help those who are surviving on surplus, the capitalists. Those who are surviving on the wage, they may not gain from this kind of capital expenditure.
So certainly have to look at the composition of that private consumption.
So we have to look at the composition of entire. If we are focusing on the multiplier effect, then for planning for budgetary allocation, we must focus on different sections of the society and their respective consumption patterns. And accordingly, we need to devise something which would also affect their, which would mitigate the inequality, and any measure to mitigate inequality will also have positive impact on them. Because, as I said in the previous slide, that if you can identify economic classes for which MPC is more than 0.7, in that case, you can have more growth rate that you would see in case of capital expenditure. Right. So this is so measures to mitigate inequality will also mitigate, or it will also have growth impact. That was the first last one. So the alternative is obvious. So the alternative is obvious that we need to focus on that particular level of multiplier or that particular level, which can give you higher multiplier. Because if you are focusing on mitigating the inequality, if you are focusing on economically downtrodden, deprived section of the society, informal workers, agricultural workers, agriculture sector as a whole, then that would also help you to achieve the positive growth. So we have alternatives, but unfortunately, we are not following that in the formulation of this particular budget. Whatever we are focusing right now, that is not going to mitigate the inequality, and it may also not give you desired level of growth.
I have one question that you may answer later. Are there any positive sides of the budget? Like, do you see any positive sides? Because how they are making the policies, their expenditure patterns.
So what we can see that in the last 30 years, no budget is different. You will have similar patterns. That is why when I was talking about the numbers, we have those two patterns continuously that we are witnessing in the last 30 years. We are focusing more on fiscal prudence, We are focusing even we are spending money. So this budget is not. This budget could have been different if you would have focused more on agriculture. If you look at, I just discussed the overall budget for agriculture. Even the very promising scheme of the government of India, that is, it is for economic support system for farmers. PM, there also you have last year it was 60,000 crore rupees, this year also you have 2,000 crore. So if you take into consideration inflation, then obviously you don't have any money. It actually.
Anyway, it does not make agriculture sustainable.
Anyway, so, but that income is going in the hands of farmers who have higher MPC. That could have some other impact. Approach now, inclusive management, and this is not only about this particular budget.
They would have also taken this thing into consideration.
There are many in the last, since I am talking about the last 3 decades, there are many of my senior colleagues who are part of that budget formulation, and they are also concerned on the same plan. So not only IAS officers are responsible for this, even mainstream economists, I am also part of that community. So we are also responsible. No, I did not say anything which was political. I said, I just that your expenditure pattern is not having any economic loss. I'm little brutal when I am commenting like that. So it's
That's why we are not getting the results. And some of we can say that growth is not like the motive of the Union Budget is not to serve it and use it. So, and I think it's obviously.
you can see it now. That's okay.
But I understood when I was looking at the budget, I understood that when they change the tax slab, that up to 7 lakhs, they have to pay only a certain amount, and they don't have to show that investment. So in that case, their purchasing power is definitely increasing. And since we are focusing on the multiplier effect, that will increase the consumption, especially of the middle class. So shouldn't it have a positive effect?
So I hope you are also aware about the new tax regime and the old tax regime. And this changes would actually be there in the new tax regime, right? So how many of us are you in the old tax regime or new? You are in new. What was it? Oh,
I guess.
huh?
I guess what copper doesn't.
So it's a very mixed thing. So first of all, there are very less number of, very less proportion of the population pays direct tax. Right? This policy would also, this obviously there would be some impact on their increase in consumption that would also boost demand, but that is very minimal. That is not going to have very significant impact on them. It may have significant impact on the new channel debate, but not in the beginning. So these are some reality other than the political campaign.
So we are talking about the inequality. So as mentioned by our finance minister,
she talked about the lab grown diamonds, I think, lab grown diamonds, that more focus will be on that and not on natural diamonds. This is mentioned in budget. So if we are talking about lab grown diamonds, then there will be need of skilled laborers instead of non-skilled laborers. So this will be creating unemployment and this will be creating inequality in our country. So if they are not, means they are not thinking about that thing. Are you thinking of what are your views on that? They are not thinking about that, thinking unemployment increase होगा और inequality increase होगी. अगर हम lab grown
must be thinking about that क्योंकि ये सबको पता है कि अगर हम कुछ ऐसा टेक्निक और ऐसा टेक्नोलॉजी का इम्प्लीमेंट करने जा रहे हैं जिससे वर्कर का डिस्प्लेसमेंट होगा तो ऑब्वियसली उसका एक इम्पैक्ट तो होगा ये समझते हैं लेकिन एक जो इम्पोर्टेंट चीज आपने अपने सवाल में पूछी which is regarding skill क्योंकि ऑब्वियसली आप कुछ नया टेक्निक इस्तेमाल करने जा रहे हैं तो एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग क्या है जो मेन स्ट्रीम इकोनॉमिक का अंडरस्टैंडिंग क्या है वो ये है कि जब हम स्किल वाले सेक्टर में जाते हैं तो हमें उसके लिए स्किल डेवलपमेंट इवन इन दिस बजट यू हैव वेरी गुड प्रमोशन फॉर स्किल डेवलपमेंट और स्किल डेवलपमेंट का ये जो प्रोग्राम है ये ऐसा नया है इससे पहले भी ये था तो अब बात ये है कि जब स्किल डेवलपमेंट आप करते हैं तो फिर आप जो डिजायर कर रहे थे ग्रोथ या फिर एक एम्प्लॉयमेंट का ग्रोथ वो भी तो होना चाहिए था वो क्यों नहीं हो रहा है और ऐसा नहीं है कि इसका आंसर हमारे पास नहीं है बहुत सारे लोग हैं हमारे प्रोफेसर प्रभाव करता है वो कितने सालों से बूढ़े हो गए वो बोलते कितने सालों से ये बात बोल रहे हैं कि इस तरह का जो इकोनॉमिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग है स्किल डेवलपमेंट का उसका मेजर इम्पैक्ट जो आप चाह रहे हैं वो नहीं होगा उसका एक कारण क्या है उसका कारण ये है स्किल को लेकर के कि आप मान लीजिए कि आज की तारीख में हम आपको एक पर्टिकुलर स्किल दे रहे हैं ठीक है स्किल लेने का आपको मान लीजिए कि 1 साल का समय 1 साल के बाद जब आप जॉब मार्केट में जा रहे हैं उस समय में जिस स्किल को आपने एक्वायर किया उस स्किल के अकॉर्डिंग कोई जॉब अवेलेबल नहीं अब उससे क्या हुआ कि आपने 1 साल और इंतजार किया तब तक में जो स्किल आपने एक्वायर किया था वो आउटडेटेड हो अब आपको 2 साल के बाद वाले जॉब मार्केट में सस्टेन करने के लिए एक नया स्किल एक्वायर करना वो ये रहा है कि हम स्किल डेवलपमेंट से फोकस करें हमें उतना ही फोकस करना चाहिए एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन ताकि हम स्किल अगर दे रहे हैं तो एट द सेम टाइम उनको एब्जॉर्ब करें द जॉब अगर हमको एब्जॉर्प्शन नहीं होगा जॉब तो बेसिकली आपका स्किल देना भी घाटे का सौदा है और ऑब्वियसली जो ग्रोथ का आप इम्पैक्ट देखना चाहते हैं वो
उन्होंने एजुकेशन पे सिर्फ 0.1 से इंक्रीज करा है और अगर हम देखें
इन्फ्लेशन के हिसाब से वो
पर हेल्थ पे तो उन्होंने इतना ज्यादा इंक्रीज करा
इसमें क्या है
है हेल्थ इंक्रीज करा है लेकिन एजुकेशन पे 0.1% इंक्रीज करा है तो ये भी तो
नहीं हेल्थ में भी जो इंक्रीज किया ना वो कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ हॉस्पिटल्स वगैरह पे भी इंक्रीज जैसे नॉर्थ ईस्ट में कुछ हॉस्पिटल का कंस्ट्रक्शन करना है फिर जो डिस्प्यूटेड एरियाज है उसमें कंस्ट्रक्शन करना है तो कंस्ट्रक्शन देखिए एक चीज हम लोग को और भी समझना चाहिए खासकर इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज को जब हम लोग डिस्कस करते हैं तो उसमें ये चीज समझना बहुत जरूरी है कि बिल्डिंग कंस्ट्रक्शन करना जरूरी है इट मे बी नेसेसरी बट नॉट सफिशिएंट कंडीशन टू अचीव द डिजायर नेसेसरी बट क्यों क्योंकि अगर मान लीजिए आपने बिल्डिंग बना दी टीचर नहीं और टीचर है स्टूडेंट नहीं आ रहा है स्टूडेंट मोटिवेटेड नहीं है तो आपको बिल्डिंग बनाना भी यूजफुल नहीं सो यू मस्ट फोकस ऑन बिल्डिंग schools at the same time you need to motivate students to participate in education how do you do that आप स्टूडेंट का इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन अगर सही नहीं है तो यू नीड टू सपोर्ट देम विद द फेलोशिप प्रोग्राम हमारा फेलोशिप का क्या एक्सपेंडिचर हुआ इस बार यू आर सेइंग देयर इज अ मार्जिनल इंक्रीज फेलोशिप का आपने डिजाइन किया है ना ओबीसी फेलोशिप होता है या एससी फेलोशिप होता है या माइनॉरिटी फेलोशिप होता है देयर इज अ डिक्लाइन so there is a marginal decline in case of minority fellowship there is a decline of 10%. So there are many things which are essential which may be necessary but not sufficient. So how to reach that level of expenditure which can give you the desired and how to allocate that. So budget is not only about spending money, budget is also about the allocation of money.
Yes, please. Shiva.
So I have a question as well, the expansion of simplicity. Tax slabs is changed in this budget. So how can we say that this reduces the inequality? They must have.
Reduces the inequality. I'm not saying that will increase the inequality. Anyway, बताइए आप। आपका सवाल क्या है? देखिए टैक्स स्लैब का जो एक इम्पैक्ट है जो हम लोग समझ सकते हैं ये है एक सेक्शन है इकोनॉमी के अंदर में जो बहुत ही छोटा है जिसको ये अफेक्ट करता है लेकिन टैक्स स्लैब सबको अफेक्ट नहीं करता क्योंकि हमारा मेजोरिटी ऑफ जो इनकम ग्रुप है बहुत सारे लोग 20,000 एनुअल रिपोर्ट आया रिसेंटली जिसमें ये कहा गया कि मेजोरिटी ऑफ इंडियन पॉपुलेशन आर अर्निंग लेस देन 25,000 एनुअल है ना। तो अगर इस तरह का नंबर है तो टैक्स पे करने वाला जो ग्रुप है वो ऑलरेडी छोटा है तो टैक्स पे करने वाला ग्रुप आपका छोटा है तो ऑब्वियसली इस तरह का जो पॉलिसी इम्पैक्ट होगा वो भी बहुत छोटा होगा है ना। जब ये इम्पैक्ट छोटा होगा तो आप जो सोच रहे हैं कि हम इससे कोई मेजर ब्रेक थ्रू कर लेंगे वो नहीं पॉसिबल। There is another confusion in general discourse that this kind of changes is basically focusing on the middle class, and this whole middle class is very distributed. So everyone in this country feels that, except few very ultra rich people, they feel that they are part of the middle class. And even within the middle class, they would say that I'm lower middle class, middle class, upper middle class, like that. Do we have any clarification, any conceptual clarity on the middle class? We don't have it right now. If you look at the class perspective and try to understand the political and their impact, then basically we need to look at broadly two classes. There is one working class who consumes entire of their income, and there is a capitalist class which saves all whatever they have. So this is between these two, on the basis of your MPC or the proportion of your consumption, proportion of income that you consume, on that basis, it would you would be placed in between these two classes, and the policies would affect accordingly.
So, as you previously mentioned that we are seeing same trends in all annual budget, there is no difference in all.
Broad range are same.
So,
There would be some exceptions. Some exceptions when in 2004-5 or maybe 6, Manrega was implemented in 2005. So employment generation program was implemented. That had very good impact on the overall economy. Our growth rate increased to 9%. If I'm right, 9%.
सर हम मतलब आपने मतलब मोस्टली आपने कहा कि इतना ज्यादा डिफरेंट नहीं है किसी एनुअल बजट की पॉलिसीज वगैरह में। तो हमें प्रीवियस बजट हम जब एनालाइज करते हैं हमको सारी शॉर्टकमिंग्स पता है कि मतलब अभी हमने डिस्कस भी करी है, हमने डेटा डिस्कस, बट अब जो हमारा जो न्यू बजट बन रहा है तो फिर हम उसको क्यों नहीं दिमाग में लेकर हम सब कुछ करते हैं, वही चीज क्यों फॉलो करते हैं।
किसी को मुझे मौका मिला अभी your question is very good. We are realizing year after year, we are realizing that whatever we are trying to do, we are not able to achieve. है ना, ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हमारे पास हम बोलते हैं कि हम 5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी वाला याद है सब लोगों को। तो 3-4 years ago, our finance minister said that by 2024 next हमारा इकोनॉमी 5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी हो गई। ठीक है, तो एक ऑब्जेक्टिव हमने सेट किया। ठीक है, आपने एक ऑब्जेक्टिव सेट किया, उसके लिए आपको पर ईयर कितना ग्रोथ चाहिए था, उस समय के हिसाब से 10% का ग्रोथ, 10% का ग्रोथ रेट अगर चाहिए था तो एक्सपेंडिचर प्लान क्या होना चाहिए था, उसके अकॉर्डिंग था। और आपने अगर किया भी उस समय के हिसाब से आपको लगा कि चलो ये एक्सपेंडिचर प्लान फिट करता है इस पर्टिकुलर गोल को अचीव कर, लेकिन आपने 1 साल 2 साल के बाद देखा कि वो नहीं हुआ, then obviously you need to change. That change is important because the dominant political discourse in this country is saying that the mainstream economic thinking are still believing that there is something called crowding power, which is image, which is not real. There is a section in the society, in the economy, in the economists, they feel that we can achieve higher growth rate, and that would also create employment. This is their thinking, that higher growth rate and employment will be created through increasing capital expenditure. But that is not happening. Right, but in 1 year, when you have spent money on generating employment, you increase the income of the rural population through Manrega program. Then the next year or the subsequent years, you had growth rate of 9%, 8%, or 7%. When the entire world was facing global crisis, global economic crisis, 2008, we had 6% growth rate. 6% growth rate. And when in 2020, the entire world was facing the pandemic, our growth rate was the lowest on this planet. Right. So we need to adopt such policies based on our experience. We also need to clearly see the loopholes in certain policies, and we need to rectify. Those are very much desirable things, but unfortunately,
I know. This is just a comment that I really like the fact that when we are listening to budgeting news and other places. So basically just throw numbers on us and then we get rapid with okay, this is happening. It's very good. I really like the fact that you actually made us sit down and look at the growth and the multiplier level and see that whether the approach of the government has been correct in that manner or not. So that was really a good undertaking that I was from the lecture. So thank you for that.
so that was actually when I was talking to Rosna Madam that what should I do? In this
Yeah.
particular lecture? Then I said that we generally when we are talking about the budget, then we just focus on numbers.
Exactly.
We just bombard everyone with the number that this number is rising, this number is going down. But since we are students of economics, we need to think about the economic principles responsible for that particular expenditure behavior of the government. And that's why I decided to follow this particular pattern. Still, Jasna was asking for some more numbers on budget. So I could not provide that. So I tried to plug those numbers in brick. So those numbers are there. Those numbers are there. Right. So this is what happened. There was no last.
So how can we expect government to achieve both at the same, like capital expenditure of the leads to
Equity
inequality?
and efficiency.
Yes, sir, so it leads to inequality, so like, isn't it like putting the burden on the government to be efficient and equitable as well?
What is parameter to judge efficiency of any institution or any economic entity?
Sir,
So generally, profit is considered as parameter to. There is a very good paper by our Professor Prabhat Patnaik in EPW. The name of the paper is on efficiency. That is the name. There he talks about this misconception about efficiency. You believe that increasing profit is a sign of your efficient position or increasing efficiency. That is actually problem. For a government, increasing surplus in the economy should not be the ideal thing. It should not be the desirable thing. For a government, you need to use this fiscal tool, which we call budget. That tool should be used to redistribute income in favor of poor sections of society. Right. So Budget is not only about achieving high growth rate. Budget is also about redistribution of income, decreasing the inequality level in the economy. So those things are essential. That's why, if you go back to Adam Smith's paper, I hope you would have covered some principles of taxation. So there also you have this principle only. What is the role of the budget in the national budget? You need that to redistribute income, because there is a section of the society which survives on the surplus generated by something else. Right? To some kind of exploitation at all. So government should act in a manner that provides that kind of surplus to take some part of the surplus generated in the economy and give it to the poor society. So this is the desirable function of the government through fiscal. And if you focus on that, then obviously efficiency will also increase. And it is proved that if you are focusing on giving income to the poor section of the society, that will have very good impact on the growth rate. Obviously, that will also generate profit, surplus to rich section as well.
Thank you so much, sir. What an insightful session it was. Let us all acknowledge sir with a huge round of applause.
Now I request our teacher in charge, Dr. Jyotsna ma'am, to kindly come forward and extend a vote of thanks.
Sorry, budget number two.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mani, for this wonderful and interactive session. Personally, I recall so many macroeconomic basic things over your lecture. And I extend my thanks to my principal ma'am, my non-teaching supporting staffs, my colleagues, and my students. I appreciate your enthusiasm and thank you. Thank you so much.
First, you all please be seated. We request you all to fill the feedback form which will be circulated in your group. One is always for being here, Dr. Nominal and you could start from first row going first and then. Pardon?